The market is crashing, guys. Stop. Do not buy any more investments. Get out of real estate right now before you're the one left holding the bag. Have you guys heard that before or seen that in a recent headline? National data shows. Now, the national headlines are extremely misleading to local markets. So no matter what you see nationally in all these clickbaity headlines, that's not necessarily what's happening in your local market. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share with you guys how this national data can really mislead you on what's going on in your backyard or where you're thinking about investing. Before I get into that, if you guys like this stuff, find it valuable, please like, subscribe, share. It really helps me out and helps out the community because we do all this for free. My name is Cameron Tope. I'm with Emerson Property Management. I've been doing this for a little over a decade now, right? And we manage just over 300 properties in greater Houston area. So we have the data to share with you on what's going on in the Houston market. And that's what I want to talk about today. Firstly, problem with national data. I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines. Nationally, rents are dropping. Nationally, inventory's up. Nationally this, nationally that. They talk about the real estate market as a whole, or maybe it's not crashing, but rents are slowing down or things are slowing down. The rate of growth is slowing down. And the media thrives on this, guys. They want you to get emotionally engaged. They want you to get all fired up and maybe make a rash decision, but you keep watching the television. You keep watching the TV. You keep listening to the soundbite, and they keep playing like everything is going to burn down around you unless you act. And there's a couple, look at these couple articles I found. The housing market is a bubble full of fraud and it's going to pop. Housing market experts see alarming trend. Breaking, a wave of real estate defaults has begun. Guys, I can go on and on. Crash time is now. The good thing is, ... And that's from your good old buddy, Robert Kiyosaki, Mr. Rich Dad Poor Dad. So guys, I could find 1,000 articles on why real estate is going to go bust and we're all going to lose our houses and the investments and our tenants are going to move out. We're not going to be able to afford our mortgage payments. But just remember, the media thrives off of that. That is their job, to get eyeballs and get attention. So when you see a clickbaity headline, and I do it too, but just try to take a step back, look at it and go, is this really what's going on? Is this really even applicable to my market? If you're investing in Houston where we are, if it's applicable to even my market, if there's a bunch of issues with natural disasters like a hurricane, maybe that's not applicable to the West Coast, but earthquakes are not really applicable to the East Coast, or flooding or what have you. So you just gotta think about that and just apply it to what you're investing. I don't want you guys to miss out. And I'm saying this for Houston. Houston's a great market. I've been investing in, like I said, over a decade, but no matter what market you're gonna invest in, don't take the national data and do a blanket statement that doesn't even apply or think it does apply to your local market. And I'll give you a couple examples here in Houston. So specifically here in Houston, if you guys are familiar with the market, we have the inner loop, which is, the city, which very little cash flow in there. I guess if you get on the east side, east downtown, there's still some, but these prices are very high. You're talking 4, 5, 6, 700,000, which might not be high to somebody in California, Chicago, New York, but it is high for Houston. It is very different. You are playing an appreciation game that in the loop. If you get outside in the suburbs like Katy, Sugarland, Cypress, Spring, all along the west side really is a great side to invest in. Those have great school districts. The fundamentals are phenomenal. I have owned properties there for almost a decade, and some of them I've had one tenant, some of them I've had two. So, people move there and they stay, and the occupancy is phenomenal. But that's very different than you looking downtown you're looking at the yuppies, the young urban professionals. Those are maybe their demographic, whereas you have families that are out in the suburbs. They're looking for good school districts, safe areas. So even within a city, you have very different markets. Now, Houston's huge, right? It's a top 5, always competes in the top 5, maybe 3, 4, 5 biggest cities in the country. So we have huge areas that are very, very different. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but even the rent growth in those areas and the vacancy and eviction rates in certain pockets of Houston can be very different. So even if you see something that says, so we talk about nationally, rents are compressed or falling or whatever, even if it's growing, even if it's good, rents are accelerating at an all-time high. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's happening in Houston, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's happening in your backyard where your property is. There are properties that we have been offloading for investors that have taken almost a year to sell. There have been properties that have sat vacant for over 100 days. In that same time period, we have sold single family rentals in great areas that are taken care of and well maintained, that are desirable, in less than a week. We have had occupants and we've had to kick tenants out because the owners want to sell some of these properties. So same market condition overall, but two totally different experiences. I've done a video, and that'll be up here or here, on how much money we had an investor lose. And it's just not apples to apples. Even in this market, you can have an investor with a fantastic experience that's buying great, desirable properties, and then you have one that's trying to get the cheapest, get in for the lowest amount of money. Who cares if it's in a war zone? You know, if you guys have heard of Sunnyside, South Park, Greens Point, they call it Guns Point. You know, some of these areas, or some of these transitioning areas, you got to be careful because it's not as desirable. And desirability doesn't really matter when, over the past decade, well, I guess now 15 years, we've had a housing supply shortage. So it doesn't really matter. It's like, hey, you're a tenant. I don't care. I've got 50 phone calls behind you. Are you taking this property or not? You'll jump on it. But now you're getting fewer and fewer phone calls. We're seeing it across the data. We're all getting fewer and fewer phone calls. So each lead is more and more important, and the tenants have more options. So they want to go to desirable areas. Here are a couple handful of things that make Houston very, very desirable from an investment standpoint. There is no zoning in Houston, and this is super unique. When I came from Southern Ohio, and you know, it's rural and whatnot, but I could not believe that you can have single family homes and then right across the street have industrial, right across the street have retail. There's no zoning. So be cognizant of that as an investor. You know, if you're going to invest, you got to know kind of what's around. You don't want somebody putting in a used auto park shop or a trailer park next to your single family rental, but it can also be super business friendly. The fact that there is so much opportunity in the Houston market, so much little regulation. And having said that, another piece of that is the ability for us to be able to do our jobs and run our business. It is super landlord friendly. Texas is a great state. We have had a handful of people come in from California. They move their money, they sell their property in California, and really they can buy one or two homes cash in Houston for what they cashed out in their California property. I've heard horror stories 1 to 2 years from our fellow, National Association of Residential Property Managers, from my property management clients and colleagues over there. Year, 2 years to get people out. We have never, should knock on wood, we have never had that happen here in Houston. The most we have had is a couple months, although go through an appeal, but I would say 8 to 10 weeks is about the max that we have had to deal with. So typically 4 to 6 weeks, we get those folks out and we're moving on, which is hugely important when you're talking about your lifeblood, your cash flow. That is your lifeblood of your investment. So if you lose investment or your cash flow for a year or two, it is very hard to make that property make sense. If you have to go through an eviction, our eviction rate was 0.8%. So what is that? 8 out of 1,000 last year. So we don't really evict that many people, but when we do, you're looking at a month to 2 months of vacancy. And then the other thing, Houston has become a very diverse economy. So, when I started with BP, 15 years ago, it was one of those where everybody was talking about everything was oil and gas. Everything was oil and gas. And then the economy started coming in. But after 2008 and things crashed, the economy started to come back and diversify. There is an incredible medical community in Houston. So you have the energy corridor and oil and gas that has just thrived there for decades. And you've got refineries in the south. So the energy market really is great in Houston and strong. However, medical has come in, retail has come in, and a lot of service-based businesses have come in as well. So that got hit very hard during COVID. Obviously, restaurants and retail got crushed, but that is very strong. So you have the retail side, service-based, and then you have a lot of the medical and the energy. So it's, medical is going to be there. You guys have probably heard about the baby boomers and that huge silver wave that's coming through. So that's not going anywhere. Texas Children's is a phenomenal, MD Anderson is a phenomenal facility. And more and more, we're seeing tech companies come to Houston. At least if it's not their headquarters, they're having an office here. You guys have probably heard about the mass exodus of all these, deca millionaires and 100 millionaires and billionaires coming out of California to move to more business-friendly states. So Texas is one of those recipients, and Houston. Let's talk a little bit about the data. Houston, it is very difficult to cash flow in Houston. I totally understand that. It has been something that has been very difficult. However, I will say that last year, I actually, across my portfolio, paid less in property taxes than last year, the previous year. So we had a huge run up, but then those tax rates and all that craziness from COVID got flushed out of the system. So my property taxes actually went down. So if you guys are getting tight on cash flow, understand that hopefully the insurance rates, those have been crazy still, but hopefully insurance rates will flatten out and your property taxes will flatten out so that if we do get some modest rent growth, we can start increasing your cash flow. A couple other things I'll mention. We're strong net migration. We have people still want to move here, like I mentioned, for business-friendly states. I'm not going to get on the stats in that. I put out a couple of reports on that over the past few months, but we have people wanting to move to Houston, and we need renters. So if we don't have people moving here, we don't have renters. We do have modest supply increases. So this has been something I've been sharing with our investors internally, and I'm sharing in our monthly newsletter. But we do have supply, a lot of supply coming online. And again, when you have, it's overall supply and demand. When you have a lot of supply and the same demand, we're getting a little bit when we have a glut of supply. We have people who can get choosy. They can get picky. They can just select the property that has the perfect carpet or the right paint that they want. So we're seeing properties sit a little bit longer. This is what I want to share, the big data I want to share behind, Zillow and the differences. So we have the national data, which nationally rents, they say, are about plus 3.5% year over year. Now this is, again, all Zillow data, which they have quite a bit of data for us. Even in Texas, if we were going to say Texas was a certain way or Texas saw this, look, we've got the major metros here. This is Houston, Dallas, Austin. So Houston saw a drop of 4.2%. There's the average rent, 18.24. Dallas, Austin saw an 11.6% drop in rent. So Houston 4.2, Dallas is flat, up a little bit. Austin's down 11, and the market's up 3.5. So this is the stuff I'm talking about, y'all, where you can see a very different picture nationally versus locally. And I will tell you that we are seeing a softening in rents, but mostly on places that are extremely high priced or that are in less desirable areas. I was looking at the data, and I just published this in our newsletter last month. We leased properties in 8 days in April. So 8 days we had properties leased with we didn't need to do any price drops for that. So 8 days, 100% of asking price. In May, 2025, we leased properties in 21 days. So a little bit more, but there was one in there that was like 60 days that was sitting on the market that we had to do some drops on, but it wasn't in the most desirable area. So, even seeing this to say, oh no, you have a little bit of rent drop in your area. If it was Austin, we were seeing 11%. Even then, we talked about differences, different pockets. I'm not all that familiar with the various places around Austin, but in Houston, I can tell you right now, we are leasing properties quickly in desirable areas. We are not leasing properties quickly in areas that are less desirable. We're having to do price drops. That's where you're seeing some of that. That's my opinion based on our 300, data points here across Houston. So that's specifically what I'm talking about when I say the market's different than the national data. So guys, takeaway, real estate is local. Understand that. Don't think just because everything's sunshine and rainbows that means your area you're investing in is the same. And don't believe that if it's all doom and gloom, that doesn't mean your area that you're investing in is the same. Also, if you're sitting on the sidelines, do your own research. There you go again. Don't just look at this like, oh, that's all bad or all good and paint it with a broad brush. Think about where you want to invest. Look at the fundamentals. And as long as the fundamentals play out, the pundits and the nonsense on the clickbait, all that crap's going to go on no matter what. I actually just bought a property this year, last month. I bought a property in a good area in Houston. Actually, it was in the Katy area. And I'm still buying. If there are deals to be had, this is a perfect time. It is a buyer's market. I don't want to compete. It was hard over the late 2000s, the teens up to 2020. It was extremely difficult to stand out as a buyer because there was tight inventory. So the seller had all the control. Now that there are very little buyers and people are having to waive contingencies and do crazy stuff. You guys heard about that during COVID. So But now, you can put an offer on, and you might offer, this property I bought was almost 30% off market value. And so this time when you have less buyers, that's when you can get good assets, and you want to hold that asset. Interest rates might not be great. I understand that, but there are still great pockets to invest. Fundamentals don't change. School districts don't change. People, well, I guess they can, but very slowly. People want to move to certain areas, and they don't want to be in other areas. I personally do not want to be, I don't want to buy and wait and hope that, this path of progress is coming. I want to buy in good areas with good fundamentals where people want to be, and own those for as long as I possibly can. And like I mentioned, if you're the savvy investors, don't read all this nonsense. If you guys listen, I love Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Love it, love it, love it. It's a fantastic book. However, I do not listen to Robert Kiyosaki make market predictions. He has made, I don't even know how many predictions over the past 15 years about how the market's going to crash. Here we are, all-time highs. So be cognizant of that. When you're savvy investors might look at the highlights and the articles, but they'll dig in specific and look at how that applies to their investment portfolios. Just a couple last things. What should you guys be watching if you're wanting to invest in Houston or invest in another market? What should I really be paying attention on? Occupancy is a huge thing. That is your lifeblood for your investment. Days on market is another huge thing. That is something that, how long is it taking to get that property leased? And those kind of tie together, right? Occupancy and days on market. You could have a lot of renewals, which would increase your occupancy, but once that property comes up vacant, how long is it taking to lease that property? That is super important. Eviction rate, that is something that you guys can monitor. I can tell you now, and I'm not saying this just because I'm biased as a property manager, but if you place a tenant, your odds of evicting are like 20 or 30 or 40 times higher than if a property manager places. I can tell you last year in 2024, 93.5% of all the evictions we did were on owners that they placed the tenant or their agent placed the tenant. We only did it on, 4 or 6.3% or 6.5%. That's all the evictions we did out of the whole mess of them. And our overall eviction rate is 0.8%. So understand that eviction date. If you see defaults and eviction data start going up, there's a problem. And the last piece of data is rent collection. So rent collection, because if you're not collecting rent, the odds are you're going to evict, which you can do that. But there are some landlords that don't even do that. So rent collection, eviction rate, days on market, and occupancy. Watch those in your market. If you guys are like, man, I don't know how to pull all that together. I do a monthly newsletter across everybody. So I'll put the link down below to subscribe to that if you want. It's totally free, but it just keeps a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the Houston market. I hope you guys found that valuable. If you did, let me know. If you didn't, let me know. And remember, the headline can be whatever. Look at what you're doing in your specific market. Don't believe all these pundits and clickbait nonsense. Okay, y'all. See you next week.